My name is Carolyn. I go by Carol or Carolyn. I'm a member of the PSL. I'm also a labor organizer. I'm excited to be here today because it's always exciting to grow a branch in a different city, different state. I think that right now in the era of Trump, it's really important to build class unity and to really take away the power, take away the authority that the government kind of has over all of us, and just make a better society. It's really important to take a part in building a party that will do that, or allying with parties that will do that.
So with that, we'll probably just jump right in and see this sort of.
Cool. So just recently I was browsing job boards online, and I found that police officers' starting salary is about $50,000 a year. Depends where you're at, but that's kind of like a median range. For someone who's poor, $50,000 a year is amazing, and the illusion that holding the gun on behalf of the ruling class to build justice is a dream. But the truth is, the cops work for a wage and a salary like other workers, but their job is to be on the front lines of class repression. They have invested in their career, and their career shapes their consciousness and political loyalties. We are commonly taught by the education system, the media, criminal justice system, and authority figures that the police are here to protect and serve, but let's stop and think about what they protect and who they serve. In the case of police terror, the police will protect their own, and with only a handful of convictions of killer cops, compared to the tens of thousands of people who have been murdered by police since the birth of the nation. I want to add that the actual number of police killings is unknown because so many deaths have gone unaccounted for. Brian Burgart, a former editor of Reno News and Review, began collecting data of police killings and created a database called Fatal Encounters to monitor police killings in the U.S. He found that from 2000 to 2014, at least 12,137 people killed by there have been at least 12,137 people killed by police, compared to just 5,830 that were reported by the FBI, or to the FBI by the police, over the same period. And this is just an estimate, and they think that the records are only about 60% complete so far. The media portrays police brutality as a fairly new phenomenon, but one only needs to turn to history to find out that the police repression is tied to the rise of have and have-nots, with those few that have the wealth and power maintaining control of the capitalist state system. Examples of the state include courts, police, prisons, and armies. The state has the authority to criminalize and legalize people, places, and things, while the police serve the class interests of the capitalists and protect them and their property through law enforcement, no matter how unethical the law may be. Take, for instance, chattel slavery, which made it legal for white landowning males to own black people. The first U.S. police forces were actually slave patrols who were responsible for controlling, returning, and punishing runaway slaves. The first slave patrol was in 1704 in South Carolina as a response to the possibility of slave revolts and maintained a power balance between master and slave. Simultaneously, as slave patrols were being conducted, so too were expeditions of U.S. Army units to steal land from natives and Mexicanos in the Midwest and Southwest. Native Americans are also disproportionately murdered and incarcerated by police terror and have a legacy of suffering in reservations far from their homes and forced assimilation through Indian schools to make them more American. The U.S. Empire's wealth was made from the enslavement of Africans and Native people, genocide of Native peoples, stealing of land from natives and Mexicanos, which was effectively carried out by the state army and later police force. Police in the United States went from protecting the institution of slavery to upholding capitalist interests. Marxists understand the state to be an organized, coercive power designed to enforce the interests of those who own property, as well as the overall system of property ownership in any given era in history. The state is a product of irreconcilable class conflict within a social structure. It seeks to regulate society and this class conflict on behalf of the dominant ruling class. As long as the rich hold all of the state power, the working class will be repressed. It is not in the interest of the capitalist ruling class to distribute the wealth they have hoarded or the power they conceded through violence and unjust laws. Although the United States changed epochs from slavery to capitalism, the distribution of land ownership stayed in the hands of the rich because of the organization of the state. Black people have been resisting the bonds of slavery since the beginning, when they were kidnapped and brought to the Americas. Slaves on the plantation continued the tradition of resisting by sabotaging the tools and crops on the plantation, learned to read, and they organized for their freedom. The remnants of slavery exist in the treatment of black folks in America. Despite making up 14% of the population in the United States, black folks make up 37% of the prison population, according to most sources, including the NAACP. Black people are the most targeted for police terror in the form of extrajudicial killings and mass incarceration. We can see the benefits of slavery not just from repression from ruling class interests, but also in the creation of the prison system, which legally makes a convict property of the federal government. The government was then able to lease convict labor to the highest bidder. Currently, private prisons have taken the U.S. by storm as a money-making scheme to incarcerate people and profit from their existence in prison. This happens to all folks. Prisons continue to sell convict labor to corporations like Whole Foods and military contractors for as little as $0.25 a day for the prisoner's labor. America prides itself on being the land of the free, but anyone looking at the statistics can conclude that this is untrue. The U.S. makes up 5% of the world's population, but it leads incarceration numbers with 25% of the world's prison population. Similarly, the undocumented community is being thrown into for-profit prison detention centers in order to control and intimidate immigrants. I focused a lot on police terror in the black community, not because it's more important than any other oppressed nation, but because it is important to understand the legacy of slavery and the police force. The state has the authority to maintain social order by creating policies to criminalize people. We see this in the case of immigration policies, which are not aimed towards amnesty, rather quota systems for regulating the amount of non-white Americans. The United States immigration policies are not designated to bring in the poor or to be humanitarian or for the betterment of American society. Rather, they are designed by the lobbyists of capitalists who want to ruthlessly exploit the underpaid and super exploited cheap labor source from Mexico and Central America and all other countries of the oppressed nations. Capitalism would rather have 11 million undocumented people living in the United States, working here without rights and without the ability to organize labor unions, than people with full rights as they should have, who could demand more from their labor. State repression will only become more formidable during the era of Trump. He dog-whistled many white supremacists and bigots alike when he campaigned for law and order, mass deportations, and the banning of Muslims from entering the U.S. He is delivering on these promises with an increase in federal spending to police departments and ICE, and his executive order banning entrance from 7 predominantly Muslim countries, where U.S. imperialist wars have destroyed many communities and people's lives. I want to add that the insanely dangerous deportation system that Trump has inherited came directly from the Democratic Obama administration, which I must emphasize deported more folks than any other U.S. president. The Democratic Party is not the ally of workers, and I might add are a part of maintaining the repressive police force. Police brutality is one of the sharpest and most widely recognizable reminders that we live in a society dominated by an oppressing class. The cops commit some of the most shocking atrocities against poor and working people on a regular basis, and a broad section of the working class can identify with the experience of having been brutalized. For example, while the police have their own union, they have been key in suppressing militant worker movements. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, industrial workers began to organize and wage militant struggles in their workplaces, leading the capitalist class to rely heavily on police repression to weaken and turn back the labor upsurge. As armed enforcers of the existing social order, the police enforce patriarchal laws and norms and have historically carried out terrible violence against women and LGBTQ people who defy those norms. Given their full-time role as enforcers of an unjust system, police forces often concentrate all the prejudices of society within their ranks. On June 7th, in 1969, the modern LGBTQ movement was launched during the historic Stonewall Uprising against the police. While major gains have been won since Stonewall, police brutality against LGBTQ people remains commonplace and in recent years has expanded rapidly. In the period from 2007 to 2008, such violence increased by 150%. According to the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, LGBTQ and HIV-affected hate violence in 2012, transgender people in particular are targeted in an especially vicious manner, being 3 times more likely to be brutalized by police. according to this report on hate violence. One remedy to police brutality for reformists is increasing the use of body cameras. Body cameras did not stop police officers from murdering 14-year-old Jesse Romero from Boyle Heights, California, or 36-year-old Ronnie James Hess from Alamo, Tennessee, or 23-year-old Sylville Smith from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Also, body cameras were turned off when Justine Damon, a tourist visiting from Australia, was killed last week by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Although body cameras may be a deterrence, the character of the police as a form of repression will not change until the capitalists are no longer the ruling class. Similarly, diversifying the police force and creating a department with different races, sexualities, and genders will not stop police violence. Adding people of color to the police force has not stopped the police brutality people of color face. Diversity is not the answer to police terror. For example, in Southern California, where there have been many raids done by the ICE enforcement there, 40% of all ICE agents in Southern California terrorizing the undocumented communities are Latino. On June 7th, 2017, Joaquina Mendez Medrano was selling flowers at a graduation at a high school in Paris, California, when a police officer got off his motorcycle and flung her to the ground, causing her to be so afraid she urinated herself. This is inhumane, and the officer should be cited for excessive force, but of course he was not. Police culture breeds a fraternity-like organization of bigotry, sexism, and racism, which affects society as a whole. Police are supported by the justice system, and they get away with cover-ups for their crimes and scandals. So what will stop the cops from acting with impunity and terrorizing the community? And the answer is the people, of course. The fight against police brutality has major strategic importance because it is a potential engine of working class unity. So I'm going to give a couple examples of times when we had class unity and the state was definitely shaken to their boots. So actually one of the only times the state convicted a police officer is when the community organized the injustices of the criminal justice system. In October 2010, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union went on strike to join a demonstration demanding justice for Oscar Grant, who was murdered by a BART police officer in Oakland, California. The strike took place as the cop's trial entered the sentencing phase. While he was given an outrageously light sentence, that a cop was sentenced to any jail time at all is a testament to the threat posed by the widening people's mobilizations. Another example, although it is based mostly on the immigration rights movement, but also takes class unity, was in 2006 when the Sessenbrenner bill was trying to be passed as like a federal law in the U.S., which would have essentially made the U.S. look exactly like Arizona does right now, with the checkpoints for IDs or papers. And so, it was actually almost a general strike of over 2 million workers from across the country. Took place on May 1st, 2006. And, they stopped it. Port workers went on strike. All the warehouses went on strike. People didn't send their kids to school. And, there was probably some people in the room there that were participating that day. In Los Angeles alone, we had like 1 million people that day. And so that really scares the ruling class, because at that point they're seeing that it doesn't matter. It wasn't just immigrants coming out at that point. It was a whole community coming out and sending a strong message that they weren't going to make the United States a giant Arizona. And so that's really what is going to save us, the class unity. For example, if we want to talk about how socialism, or what police would look like under a socialist system, it would be to protect the gains of the revolution, to protect the gains that we have won in socialism, through socialism. The police would be a reflection of what the community is. So going back to like tactics of fixing community abuse, or police brutality, if the police may look like you, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna not beat you up. Their interest is to protect the rich and their property. And so class unity is the ultimate weapon against police violence. And that's ultimately what's going to stop us. We've already seen it happen, or what's going to stop them and give us the power. So we make up a larger amount of folks than they do. They're just a minority, but they have the police at their very whim. So, we need to unify because, regardless of our backgrounds, we are all being exploited by the same system. And the only way to defeat that would be to unifying against it.
Yeah.
Something I was thinking about, I'm a healthcare worker, and I work with a lot of people who have mental illness, and it's interesting the question of homelessness and mental illness as regards to the police. Like, a lot of people who, like right now it's summertime, right? It's hot in LA, and to get out of the heat, and they do this in cities like the Twin Cities or other places where it's cold. If you're out in the street and you're at risk of exposure, you'll walk into an ER and say, I'm thinking about killing myself. That you get bed, you get hot food, and people know about this, right? There are oftentimes homeless people who are frequent flyers in certain emergency rooms. But the interesting thing about it, I think, is that in order to get you in the system, they need to have someone write a hold for you. Putting you in the system, it's on your record forever. It's quasi-legal action. 5150 hold stays on your record forever. You can't own a firearm. Oftentimes you can't vote. And I think it's a very clear example of the criminalization of the homeless. And without a shadow of a doubt, there are many people who are both homeless and mentally ill. But I think, that's, I think, an issue of poverty more broadly. I mean, the reason why you're not getting treatment for mental health, it's the same reason why we don't have a roof over our head. But, in terms of like the criminalization aspect of it, I think it's a very clear example of where the state has moved to repress people who it considers surplus. I mean, people who are left to die out of exposure, people who are forced to walk into a clinic and say, I'm considering killing myself to get food. And it's completely absurd. And so I think the question is, how do we raise the issue of homelessness? And how do we raise the issue of state repression? And I think we've talked a lot about protesting, but I think we kind of need to look at where we've come in the past couple of years in terms of where protesting has brought us. Black Lives Matter only has existed for the past 4 years since.
Since the Trayvon.
Yeah.
Yep.
And already we have a major change in the dialogue internationally. People are aware of the police brutality. We have a meeting that was put together in like a week, and we have a city with, numerically speaking, it's not, Las Vegas doesn't have it's not like a New York City where you have many people who are already involved in movement. It's a new city. And we have this room full of people, and we're talking about police brutality. I don't think that would have happened in 2005 under Bush. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that, we're in a very different moment today where on Netflix we have a movie about police killing. And that movie is critically reviewed very well. Many people have seen it. People are talking about it. And I think that's only possible because of Black Lives Matter. I think Bernie Sanders, for whatever, he has many problems. I don't think we really want to get down in the weeds about Bernie Sanders today, but I don't know that we'd be talking about Bernie Sanders right now if it weren't for Occupy. And Occupy made that possible because he was talking about the same things that Occupy was talking about, the 99% of 1%. And that made a major difference. I think, there are so many problems in the United States. We're talking about homeless, we're talking about mental health, we talk about patriarchy, we talk about any number of problems that are facing people in terms of oppression, exploitation, brutality. But those things, I think, we can see the progress that we've made already in terms of raising those things. And I think everybody here today is here because we agree that only the people can make the changes. And when people are aware of those problems, we have a better sense of where we need to go. And we see the value of protest. I think, we've been talking, like I said, we've been talking a lot about protests. It's easy, I think, to talk about it in terms of the process that it's supposed to go through. But I think to look back and see the major progress that we've made through that, and there's also I mean, a lot of that was only possible because of the direct action of the community organizing, the community services they're providing. I don't think it's really an either-or question. It's very, both of them are resource intensive, and there aren't a lot of groups that can do both. But I think the national dialogue has changed because of the contribution of both. I think if we walk out of here today with anything, it's that we need to be organized, we need to join organizations, we need to draw more people into organizations, to be honest. We can't make a difference with the size of the movement as we have it today. And I think we saw a glimpse of what the size of the movement could be in December and November of last year when so many people were like, this is not my president. This is not my government. It is not a legitimate system that I will recognize. We will hit the streets and shut down cities. We saw high school walkouts. We saw strikes. And I think that's a glimpse of what could be. And I think it is a promising period for us. So getting organized and getting more people organized is really the question. Organizing the unorganized is the question before us today. I spoke a lot. Does anybody want to get in before we have final presentation? I think I wanted to thank everybody for coming out today. And I wanted to end up on a more practical note. I was researching the Mexican Revolution, and this is not the practical note, the Mexican Revolution. But I was researching it a little bit, and there's a lot that happened. The reason I was researching it is because I read a little bit for the Liberation newspaper, and 100 years ago this year was when General Pershing withdrew from Mexico. And I think that is really important because it was when we had the original Zapatistas, and we had Pancho Villa, we had a Mexican Revolution against Mexico that had been humbled by American imperialism 50 years ago and kept under its boot after having half of its land stolen from it. And this is Mexico that said, we're not going to do it anymore. People rose up and said, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And so, Pershing withdrew because the people defeated Pershing, essentially. He was unable to defeat Pancho Villa. And so I think we can take 3 important lessons from that. And one is that the military, the cops, and the whole U.S. ruling establishment, with all of its resources, its wealth, the size and its might, that establishment can be defeated. The second thing was that it's just one example of the true nature of the U.S. ruling class, that no one can make water dry, and you can't make the U.S. ruling class serve our interests. It's always been in the interest of oppressing people. And the third thing is that the Mexican Revolution shows the people themselves, not the courts, not the lawyers, not the Congress. The people themselves make the changes. And so I wanted to open up with that because I think we're part of an initiative that I wanted to invite everyone here today to, and that's the People's Congress of Resistance. It's an effort in that vein. We're getting delegates, representatives, and endorsers from all 50 states and all territories that the United States holds as colonies around the world, Puerto Rico, Guam, all the other colonies in the United States. And we're trying to create a focal point for the resistance. I mean, we've had a theme of unity in this meeting tonight, and the purpose of that is to create a pole where instead of the Democratic Party saying, we've been resisting Donald Trump, instead join the resistance by voting for Democrats in 2018 and 2020. No, that's ridiculous. We need real resistance that's separate from the Congress. And so, we saw that's possible in December, November, January, February, the last couple months, when so many people hit the streets, oftentimes for the first time, and the slow burn that the movement's been on for a little bit turned into an inferno. And I think, so where there's a slogan, it's not my president, the motivation behind the Congress is that it's not our Congress, it's not our courts, not our police, it's not our system. And we saw that millions of people, hundreds of millions around the world woke up on November the 9th, the day after the election, and said they couldn't stomach that government anymore. I think people are receptive for that. So that's really the origin of it. And how could a system that was devised by an all-male Congress of slave owners, slave traders, and so-called military heroes who cut their teeth stealing land from Native Americans, how could that be our system? So we're having the Congress in Washington, D.C. on September the 16th and the 17th. We're organizing all across the United States, and we want, this is an invitation for everyone here today to attend that conference, attend the Congress, excuse me. And really, I think, start a new chapter for the movement. It's not clear what exactly it'll be. We're still setting out a program that program's gonna be set out there. So if you would like a say in what the program will look like, if you want to say in terms of what the Congress does, be a delegate. Go to Washington, D.C. Go to talk about it on September 16th and 17th. Bring the Nevada resistance there. we hope that everyone comes out. If you're interested, I'm going to pass this around. I can contact, if you're interested, and we can send information your way. Our goal is to have everybody from every movement in the United States in attendance, and that includes the homeless movement. So if you're short on funds, we're fundraising to make that possible. So sign up if you're interested. The last thing is this center was essentially, we're allowed to use this as a donation from the outside the gender box. So there's that fishbowl there. They have that donation bowl there for them, and so this is our way of thanking them for letting us use the space for free. If you could help us out and take a little money to be beyond the gender box, that's the space on your way out. We appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming out.
Thank you.